WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It is 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 p.m. in Niamey. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar and around the world at wadr.org. First, our headlines. Burkina Faso and China deepen strategic ties as Beijing expands its engagement in the Sahel. Sierra Leone set to host ECOWAS summit amid regional security and political challenges. Authorities in Ghana probe possible involvement of government officials in a drug trafficking case worth over $200 million.
We're still interrogating a lot of government officials. It's not everything that I can put out at this stage because we are still investigating and we are still interrogating people because there's a lot that are not adding up.
And the Gambia Supreme Court rules President Barrow's removal of former Auditor General unconstitutional.
If such a position can be infringed upon, can be interfered with unconstitutionally, it means all other constitutionally protected institutions and positions are at risk.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Deborah Amour.
West African leaders are set to meet in Sierra Leone for a key ECOWAS summit as the regional bloc faces mounting challenges over democratic governance, insecurity, and divisions among the member states. The 69th Ordinary Session of the ECOWAS Conference of Heads of State and Government will take place in Freetown on July 19, with discussions expected to focus on regional stability, security cooperation, and economic integration. WADR's Atiewin Imbila reports.
The summit comes at a defining moment for ECOWAS, which is seeking to maintain its influence in the region, facing multiple crises, including military takeovers in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, persistent armed violence in the Sahel, and tensions following the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. The meeting in Freetown will bring together heads of state and government as the regional bloc looks to strengthen coordination on security, restore confidence in democratic institutions, and address growing concerns over regional unity. Ahead of the summit, Sierra Leone will host several preparatory meetings, including sessions of the ECOWAS Council of Ministers, the Mediation and Security Council, and the Administration and Finance Committee at the Bintoumani International Conference Center. Sierra Leone's Presidential Press Secretary Yusuf Kekatoma Sandi described the hosting of the summit as a major milestone for the country, saying it reflects Freetown's growing diplomatic role and its capacity to convene high-level international meetings. Beyond the symbolism of holding the summit, regional leaders are expected to use the gathering to discuss how ECOWAS can respond to evolving political and security realities while preserving its role as West Africa's main platform for cooperation and integration.
Atiewin Imbila with that report. As Europe and West Africa face growing pressure to combat human trafficking and irregular migration challenges, Nigeria and Spain have renewed their commitment to strengthening cooperation against transnational organized crime. The two countries say closer collaboration is needed to dismantle trafficking networks operating across the Africa-Europe migration corridor and improve protection for vulnerable migrants. Our correspondent in Abuja, Yechenu Sasetu, reports.
The discussions focused on expanding intelligence sharing, strengthening joint investigations, and improving support for victims of trafficking. Both countries also agreed to enhance cooperation in training law enforcement officers and coordinating cross-border operations to dismantle trafficking syndicates operating between West Africa and Europe. NAPTIP Director General Binta Bello described Spain as one of Nigeria's key partners in combating human trafficking, saying years of collaboration have contributed to the rescue of victims, the prosecution of traffickers, and stronger intelligence sharing. Spanish ambassador Juan Cel reaffirmed Madrid's commitment to supporting Nigeria's anti-trafficking efforts, stressing that human trafficking is a transnational crime that requires coordinated international action. The renewed partnership comes as European and African governments face increasing pressure to curb irregular migration while protecting victims of trafficking and dismantling criminal networks that profit from human exploitation. The strengthened partnership is expected to bolster ongoing efforts to disrupt trafficking networks, improve victim protection, and promote safer regular migration pathways. For WADR, Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja.
In a similar vein, China has reaffirmed its commitment to deepening ties with Burkina Faso, underscoring Beijing's growing engagement in the Sahel as the region goes through a significant geopolitical realignment. The pledge comes as Burkina Faso and its alliance of Sahel state partners continue to diversify international partnerships amid strained relationships with several Western allies. WADR's Francis Boniface reports.
China says it will remain a sincere friend and reliable partner of Burkina Faso, reaffirming its support during celebrations marking the 105th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party in Ouagadougou. Speaking at a symposium attended by Burkinabe government officials, academics, and development partners, Chinese Ambassador Zhao Deyong highlighted what he described as the strengthening relationship between Beijing and Ouagadougou. The ambassador reiterated China's support for Burkina Faso's sovereignty and development, saying Beijing respects the country's choice of its own political and development path. The remarks come as Burkina Faso continues to strengthen ties with non-Western partners, including China and Russia, following years of deteriorating relations with several traditional Western allies after successive military takeovers in the country. Analysts say Beijing's renewed commitment reflects its broader strategy of expanding its influence in the Sahel at a time when the region continues to witness a significant geopolitical realignment.
That was Francis Boniface with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Ghanaian authorities are investigating the possible involvement of government officials in an international drug trafficking operation after a 320-kilogram shipment of methamphetamine was intercepted in Australia. Before being seized by Australian authorities, the drugs valued at just over $200 million were concealed in bags of charcoal and shipped through Tema Port, one of West Africa's busiest commercial gateways. Speaking before Parliament's Committee on Assurances, Interior Minister Mohamed Mubarak Muntaka said preliminary investigations indicate that some public officials may have facilitated the movement of the consignment through Ghana's security system.
Our men are on the ground. Even as of yesterday, we were still interrogating a lot of government officials. It's not everything that I can put out at this stage because we are still investigating and we are still interrogating people because there's a lot that are not adding up. You could see that there's some involvement of some people within the system, and we are working at it to try to reach out to as many people as possible that we think might have played one role or the other. Because even if you put all these gadgets, remember that it is going to be operated by human beings. So if the wrong persons are sitting there, you can bring all the gadgets in this world, it will still not be safe. So we have changed our modus operandi, the way we operate, the way we place personnel. All of it is to make sure that we secure our borders. And Mr. Chair, I want to say that one of the biggest challenges that we have, in my view, is that can you just focus on Kotoka and Takoradi and Tema? We have 48 legitimate crossing points into our country. 48.
That was Ghana's Interior Minister Mohamed Mubarak Muntaka speaking there. Well, Ghana and South Africa are seeking to ease speculation over their diplomatic relations after reports that President Cyril Ramaphosa's planned visit to Accra had been rejected. Officials in both countries now say there was no diplomatic snub, explaining that bilateral talks have been postponed by mutual agreement to prevent recent xenophobic attacks in South Africa from overshadowing discussions on cooperation between the two countries. Nadede Tete has the details.
The governments of Ghana and South Africa say President Cyril Ramaphosa's planned trip to Ghana has been deferred by mutual agreements dismissing suggestions of a diplomatic fallout. The clarification follows reports that Ghana had declined the South African leader's visit amid renewed xenophobic attacks and concerns over the safety of Ghanaians living in South Africa. Government Communications Minister Felix Kwakye-Fosu says the engagement was part of the third session of the Ghana-South Africa Binational Commission, which had been planned long before the recent violence. He says Ghana proposed postponing the meeting to prevent the attacks from overshadowing discussions on bilateral cooperation.
Indeed, it was slated to take place in early August. But given the outbreak of these attacks and all the issues that have arisen thereof, we sent diplomatic communication to the South African government that we believe it is best to defer the visit until such a time when these matters have been resolved and there's a relative calm. Let me indicate that some of the headlines that have come out have been a bit sensational. They do not exactly reflect the tone of the communication.
South Africa has since echoed Ghana's explanation but expressed disappointment in how the matter has been reported. Vincent Magwenya is South Africa's presidential spokesperson.
We are disappointed with the manner in which this matter has been handled and reported because it does not reflect the true nature of development. It was not a request for a state visit and there wasn't a rejection of the visit. Ghana just simply asked for a postponement and now the issue has been misconstrued.
The postponement comes as Ghana seeks justice for Bashir Ishaq, the Ghanaian killed during anti-foreigner protests in South Africa, an account which has also been rejected by the South African authorities. Nonetheless, Accra has formally protested the incident, while both governments maintain that their long-standing partnership remains strong. For WDR, Nadede Tete, Accra.
Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has referred a constitutional reform bill adopted by Parliament to the Constitutional Council, requesting the country's highest legal authority to determine whether the procedure used to pass the amendment comply with the Constitution. The move comes amid growing political debate over the proposed changes, with critics warning that the reform could reshape the balance of power and influence Senegal's political landscape ahead of the 2029 presidential polls. Veronique Njai has more details in this report.
President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has asked the Constitutional Council to review the constitutional revision law adopted by the National Assembly on June 29th. The head of state is not challenging the content of the proposed reforms, but rather the procedure that led to their adoption. He has requested an urgent ruling from the court. The referral responds to concerns raised by members of the president's own political camp, opposition groups and sections from civil society who have criticized the reforms, arguing that some of its provisions could favor National Assembly President Ousmane Sonko ahead of the 2029 presidential race. However, the ruling PASTEF party, which holds a majority in parliament, says the amendments are based on recommendations from the 2025 National Dialogue and the 2024 Justice Reform consultations. The reform package, approved by 129 of the 165 members of parliament, proposes changes to Article 29 of the Constitution and would significantly reshape the country's institutional balance. Among the proposed changes, the President of the Republic would be prohibited from leading a political party, while the powers of the Prime Minister and the National Assembly would be strengthened. The Constitutional Council would also be replaced by a constitutional court, and the President's power to dissolve Parliament would be limited. The Constitutional Council is now expected to rule on the legality of the adoption process within the time frame requested by President Faye.
That was Veronique Njai with that report. The Supreme Court of the Gambia has ruled that President Adama Barrow's 2025 removal of former Auditor General Modu Cisse from office was unconstitutional. The judgment, delivered on Tuesday, reinforces the constitutional protection of the Auditor General's office and places fresh limits on executive authority. However, the ruling has sparked mixed reactions across the country, While many have welcomed the court's declaration that the dismissal was unlawful, others argue that the failure to reinstate Cisse sets a troubling precedent by allowing unconstitutional actions to go without meaningful consequences. Christopher Aticho tells us more in this report.
Delivered on Tuesday, the Supreme Court found that the executive failed to follow the constitutional procedures required to remove an Auditor General from office. Although the court found the dismissal unconstitutional, it declined to reinstate Cisse. Instead, it ruled that the current Auditor General, Chiano Amadou Sow, should remain in office. Critics, however, argue that the ruling places the financial burden on taxpayers rather than those responsible for the unconstitutional decision, while allowing the executive action to stand without direct accountability. Madi Jobate, a rights activist and founder of the Edward Francis Small Center for Right and Justice, shares his reaction.
The Auditor General position is a constitutionally protected position. If such a position can be infringed upon, can be interfered with unconstitutionally, it means all other constitutionally protected institutions and positions are at risk of executive outrage.
The government was ordered to pay Cisse outstanding salaries and allowances from the date of his removal until the end of his tenure, together with interest. The court also awarded him $4 million, approximately $57,000 in damages for violating his constitutional rights.
That was Christopher Aticho with that report. However, to discuss the broader implications of the ruling, do stay tuned for our guest interview segment in the second half of the news. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our headlines. Burkina Faso and China deepen strategic ties as Beijing expands its engagement in the Sahel. Sierra Leone to host ECOWAS summit amid regional security and political challenges. Authorities in Ghana probe possible involvement of government officials in a drug trafficking case worth over $200 million. And the Gambia Supreme Court rules President Barrow's removal of former Auditor General unconstitutional. Still ahead, we have the guest news, we have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Bringing you the facts beyond the headlines from Monrovia, Liberia. This is Abraham Parker. Stay tuned to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
We turn to Liberia, where the healthcare system is facing fresh pressure after a protest at Phoebe Hospital, one of the country's major referral facilities, led to a shutdown of services and the arrest of 3 healthcare workers and their leaders of the union. The officials have been charged with attempted arson, terroristic threats, rioting, obstructing of government operations, and disorderly conduct following Monday's industrial action. Authorities say the charges relate to events during the protest, while the union maintains the leaders were advocating for improved working conditions. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Located in Bon County, central Liberia, Phoebe Hospital is one of the country's most important healthcare institutions outside Monrovia. The referral hospital provides specialized medical services and serves patients from several counties, making any disruption to its operations a concern for thousands of Liberians who depend on the facility. The latest crisis began after health workers demanded changes in the leadership and management of the hospital. The protest followed a 5-day ultimatum issued by Liberia's Health Workers Union, warning of possible nationwide industrial action if workers' concerns were not addressed. Following the arrest of 3 union leaders, hundreds of hospital workers took to the streets in Bon County on Tuesday, calling for the immediate release and urging that the officials were detained while defending workers' rights. Bond County Public Defender Jefferson Blackie urged the protesters to remain calm.
There may be some other people they send to destroy. Why you do? There may send some people among you from elsewhere so as to make an inflaming situation. Nothing may happen, but we only hope that it be over the soonest.
Matthew Fire, one of the union leaders who described the allegations as misleading.
I'm not trying to present it that we are troublemakers. They have no troublemakers. Our people remain calm from yesterday up to this morning with no salary, no benefit.
The dispute highlights broader challenges facing Liberia's health sector, including concerns over working conditions, staff welfare, and the ability of public hospitals to maintain uninterrupted services. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
The ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, has approved more than $417 million to finance 5 major projects aimed at strengthening infrastructure, healthcare, housing, mining, and regional integration across West Africa. The approvals were made during the bank's 99th Board of Directors meeting in Lomé as the regional lender reaffirmed its commitment to supporting sustainable development and economic growth across ECOWAS member states. WADR's Usman Omar tells us more.
The ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development has approved over $417 million in fresh investments to support critical development projects across Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. The decisions were taken during the bank's 99th ordinary session, chaired by its president, Dr. George Agekun Donko, as part of efforts to strengthen infrastructure, healthcare, housing, financial resilience, and regional competitiveness in West Africa. The largest allocation, worth $260 million, will finance a 123-kilometer section of the Trans-Saharan Highway in Nigeria. EBID says the project is expected to improve regional connectivity, facilitate trade, reduce transport costs, and deepen economic integration within the ECOWAS region. In Côte d'Ivoire, the bank approved a 10 billion CFA franc line of credit for Bank del Habibat to expand housing finance and support small and medium-sized businesses in the construction sector. Another 80 million euros will fund the construction and maintenance of a new 150-bed regional hospital in Fakesedogu, while 12.82 billion CFA francs will be used to renovate the Symphony building in Abidjan, which will house the country's Ministry of Justice. Ghana will also benefit from a $47.4 million facility for Azuma Resources to support early-stage development of the Black Volta Gold project through the procurement of critical mining equipment. EBID President Dr. George Agekun Donko says the investments demonstrate the bank's commitment to financing projects that improve the lives of West Africans through better infrastructure, healthcare, housing, and private sector growth. The approvals are aligned with the bank's growth, resilience, and optimization strategy aimed at promoting sustainable development and shared prosperity across the region.
Usman Omar with that report.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
The Gambia Supreme Court's decision not to reinstate the country's former Auditor General, Modu Cisse, after ruling that his removal by President Adama Barrow was unconstitutional, has triggered wider debate over constitutional accountability, executive power, and the protection of independent institutions in the country. Among those raising concerns about the judgment is Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice, EFS-CRG, which argues that the court's decision does not go far enough in addressing the constitutional violations surrounding the former Auditor General's removal. To discuss the broader implications of the ruling, Madi Jobate, a Gambian rights defender and founder of EFS-CRG, joins us.
This former Auditor General, Modu Cisse, was removed from office, which he believes did not go according to what the Constitution states in terms of the appointment and removal of the Auditor General. So it's a matter of defending the Constitution, ensuring the supremacy of the Constitution. And so if the Supreme Court, having had the case, acknowledged that indeed his removal was unconstitutional, what we expected, therefore, was for the Supreme Court to restore constitutional order And that constitutional order is that the holder of that position should be reinstated so that he continues in his position as he was appointed through the constitutional process. And his removal should have been through a constitutional process. This case is so significant because the National Audit Office is a constitutionally created institution. The Auditor General position is a constitutionally protected position. And so if such a position can be infringed upon, can be interfered with unconstitutionally, then it means all other constitutionally protected institutions and positions are at risk of executive outrage. And this includes the commissioners of the National Human Rights Commission or the commissioners of the Independent Electoral Commission or the Ombudsman and even the judges of the Supreme Court, all of who are appointed and removed as laid down in the Constitution and relevant laws.
All right. We do know that he will be compensated. He will receive his salary till retirement, that is 2035, and he will also be compensated with a sum of $4 million. Doesn't this satisfy it?
No, this does not satisfy it because the issue is not a personal issue, so to speak. This is not even a dispute between the former Auditor General and the President or with the IGP. Rather, it is looking at the actions of public officials, that is the President and the Inspector General of Police, regarding a position that is protected by the Constitution. To bring in the issue of damages compensation, that is the Supreme Court's opinion. That is their decision, okay. But the core issue has been diverted, has been sidelined, and that is what concerns us. They took the matter to court. They have won the case because the Supreme Court indeed said the actions, of the President and the Inspector General of Police were unlawful and unconstitutional. And what should have followed, therefore, is to restore the man back to his position and, if anything, to put sanctions on the President and the Inspector General of Police for violating the Constitution, because violation of the Constitution carries severe consequences.
All right. You argue that the judgment could weaken constitutional safeguards and encourage future violations. What specific risks do you foresee for other independent institutions if the unconstitutional removals are not met with stronger consequences?
It is not just the fear of removal of, officers in those protected institutions. But what this also means is that those institutions and the people in charge may not perform their functions according to law for fear of reprisals, because if they fell out of favor with the President or with the government, they could also be removed. Precedent is there with this case that if they are removed, worst case scenario is even if they won the case, they took the matter to court and win the case, they could only get a compensation. But they will not get a restoration back to their position. So it's two things, therefore. One, it puts these institutions and office holders at risk, of removal, as a result of executive overreach. But the second part, or probably which should be the first part, is that it undermines the independence, the professionalism, and the integrity of these institutions simply because they may not now perform their functions as they should for fear of not offending the government that may lead to their removal.
That was our guest, Madi Jobate, a Gambian rights defender and founder of the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice. It's now time for sports stories. The round of 16 at the 2026 FIFA World Cup has concluded, with Morocco remaining the last African representative in the tournament after other African sides were eliminated at the knockout stage. The Atlas Lions continue to carry Africa's hope as the competition moves into the quarterfinals, while the tournament has also been marked by other concerns beyond the pitch, including abusive messages being sent via social media. Meanwhile, in basketball, 12 African teams have secured qualification for the second round of the 2027 FIBA Basketball World Cup qualifiers. The next window begins on August 27, with key fixtures including Senegal against Mali, Cote d'Ivoire against Egypt, and South Sudan facing Nigeria. And lastly, the defending champions of World Rugby Under-20 Championship, South Africa, have secured a place in the semi-finals of the 2026 World Rugby Under-20 Championship after completing the group stage with a perfect record. The Junior Springboks confirmed their dominance with a victory over Wales on Tuesday and will now face England in the semi-final on July 13th in Georgia. And we have come to the end of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio. Many thanks to Ismaila Kamara for the technical assistance and Maudo Juf for managing our live stream across our social media platforms. You can download our app, WADR, on the App Store and Google Play Store. My name is Deborah Amuo. Good evening. We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.